my first up, we've got three great authors. It was an honor and a privilege to do some background research on each of these three authors. Two I did not know personally. One I did know personally, but I feel like they're all friends now. The first one we're going to ask to speak tonight she goes by Anne Armistead. That is her author name. But when she's not wearing, her storytelling name of Anne Armistead, the historical romance author, she's Sandra Havelock. She's an English teacher. She's a children's writer. She's a wife, a mom of two grown daughters, and a rescue mutt named Jackpot. Why do y'all all get all these, rescue pups? Wow. Mine are all grand dogs. So I'm pleased that you guys do that. When she's not conjuring tales to write, she's reading those written by others. So I love the fact that she's a reader as much as she is a writer. She earned her English literature degree from the University of Georgia, go Dogs, and her MFA in creative writing from Spalding University. Anne, AKA Sandra, is a member of the Atlanta Writers Club and the Historical Novels Society. She co-authored with Jan Agnello the historical-based novel With Kisses from Cecily, which won the 2020 Georgia Independent Author of the Year Historical Fiction Award and November 2020 Literary Titan Silver Book Award. Anne's debut historical romance novel was titled Dangerous Conjurings, a Southern Gothic romance with a spiritually damaged heroine and an emotionally wounded hero, drawn together to face life-threatening conflicts set against the backdrop of hanging moss and murder, hoodoo and voodoo, hexes and the grotesque. Anne warns that you should enter her story at your own peril, but remember, hoodoo and voodoo only works if you believe. Her next book, Carousel Traveler, is due to be coming out this year. God bless you. A little travel romance set against 1900 Paris exhibition. So here is Miss Anne Armistead, AKA Sandra Havelock. So I'm going to address you as Anne because that's what they need to find you in your history books. So Miss Anne, I give you the floor to talk about yourself, your writing journey, and your books.
Well, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be part of this tonight. And Sharon was the one that contacted me, and I was absolutely thrilled to say yes. So here we are together virtually, but I think books is the common link that we all are here to talk about and enjoy. I am one of those weird ones. I'm a Georgia native, grew up in Georgia, born Rome, Georgia, and then lived in Brunswick and Macon before we made our way here to Atlanta. And not to give away my ancient age, I was here before 285 was even a thought. I was here when we didn't have any professional sports. When we moved here was the year the Braves and the Falcons and the Hawks, they had naming contests. And I remember thinking to myself, Falcons? What a name is that? So I'm not going to say I hexed them, since I do have a lot of historical knowledge of hoodoo and voodoo. I don't think I hexed them, but sometimes I wonder, because I did not like that name from the beginning. But I've grown up here, went to Lakeside High School in Decatur, Georgia, and University of Georgia. Married me a Yankee. Met him at Southern Bell when it used to be good old Ma Bell, and he's from New Jersey. But that's not the worst thing about him. He went to Georgia Tech. That's the worst thing about him. And then we had two daughters, and our oldest went to Auburn. So we are definitely a house divided here. I always loved reading growing up. I went to the old Decatur Library. If anyone's familiar with Decatur, you remember there was an old Decatur library that had beautiful magnolia trees in the front. And I was the one pestering my mother take me to the library every other day practically. She was extremely ecstatic when I finally became a teen and could drive myself, because I just wore her out with trips to the library. I could read, I devoured anything. And I was of that generation where you read children's books, but then there was nothing. There was no YA. So you just went right into adult books. And so when I was 12, my mother could not find enough books for me to read. So she gave me her copy, first edition, Gone with the Wind. She said, "This will keep you busy." Well, I devoured that in a weekend, and I only came out of my room to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Other than that, it was like, leave me alone. I got to go back to Scarlett, Rhett, Melanie, Ashley, don't bother me. And I was just completely mesmerized by that story of how you could create such archetypes that are with us decades later. I mean, we all know what we mean when we say Scarlett O'Hara, the line that is so famous, you know, think about it tomorrow, tomorrow is another day. So I knew from a young age I wanted to do something with words. I didn't want to do anything with numbers. That's why I married a numbers guy. So numbers, not my deal. So while math was being taught, I was reading my lit anthology under the desk, and I would have it read cover to cover by, you know, second month of school. But I was never really into the maths or sciences, always into literature and history. And I decided I would be a teacher. And so I went to UGA and got an English lit degree and an English education degree, and came out to teach. And when I saw the starting salary, I thought, no. I'm not going to take that job at Northside School of Performing Arts and make that amount of money. I have to pay rent. I have to get a car. No. And so I ended up getting hired at Southern Bell to teach at Southern Bell. I wrote documentation, did training. I put in, had people working for me that installed the very first 911 systems and the automated 411. You used to get a real operator, but then you started getting the computer generated 411. So I did that until I had kids. And then once I had kids, I went back, got recertified, and became an American Lit teacher. So I taught for 25 years, and I somehow kind of knew that it was the end of the road for teaching for me, but little did I know around the corner was COVID. So I retired right before COVID hit. So I'm very grateful for that. I got my master's in writing at Spalding University, and I studied under Sina Jeter Naslin. If you've ever read Ahab's Wife or Abundance, she was my mentor there. And I started writing my first book, which I just knew was going to, you know, be a gangbuster bestseller children's book. And of course, it's still sitting in my drawer, didn't go anywhere. But it was a novel in verse called Benevolence. And it was written about a girl who lost her mother when she was born. I kind of used my dad's story. My dad was born and his mother died when he was born. And it really was an emotional cross for him to carry through his entire life because of the way his father treated him. And so I always had that kernel of an idea to make a story out of that, and I did. And it was my creative thesis, got glowing reviews from my program, graduated, and had some people interested in picking it up, but it was kind of like not a good fit for what they were looking for in the market at that time. And so I cried my bitter tears. Oh, I can't, you know, I'm never going to be published. And then Highlights magazine started buying my historical fiction stories for children. And that was, I didn't think I could have any more success than having a story in Highlights, because I used to read Highlights in every doctor and dentist office, but I never had my own subscription because we didn't have money. I didn't have that, you know, and I would go there and I'd read it. So for me to see my byline in a Highlights magazine, I thought, okay, I'm done. I can die a happy person now because I've been published there. Highlights is a great organization to work with. And then I started working on this idea about a hoodoo conjurer. My mom was from South Carolina, and her dad in the 30s was the only Life of Georgia insurance salesman who would go sell insurance to the Gullah community. Nobody would go to the Gullah community. They were afraid of the Gullahs and couldn't understand them because of their dialect. And my mother used to tell me all these stories about riding to the Gullah community with her dad when he would go to do his insurance sales calls. So that always stuck in my head, and I thought, I'm going to do something about a hoodoo conjurer. So a couple of years later, because I am a very slow writer and I write historic fiction, so I'm constantly doing the research. I was thinking that my Barnes and Noble and anyone who ever looked at my history in Google might get a little concerned about me with all the hoodoo and voodoo I was researching, but I put together this idea of this story, and I had written the first scene of it back when I was in my MFA program, and people were writing me going, whatever happened to Elijah? Whatever happened to Leah? You've got to finish this. And so I conjured up the tale and was very, very fortunate that a small romance company was not afraid to publish a Southern romance that had a daughter of a Confederate soldier as the protagonist. This is not a very popular thing in trying to sell Southern literature, but this particular company was actually looking for a Southern writer. So I lucked in there. And so my got to show my cover, which is so cool. I love her. And so this was like my first novel that was out. And I met Jan Agnello, and she had these beautiful letters from Cecile from the right after the First World War. Cecile lived in Paris and wrote to Jan's grandmother. And when I held those letters, I said, I have got to work on this project. And Jan is a jewelry designer. I've got my jewelry that Jan's designed on. And we had this idea that we would join forces. She's an antiquer and a jewelry designer. I'm a writer. So we came up with writing the book, and she would design the jewelry to go with the book and would market it at the antique markets. And so we did, and it's done very well. The letters are just beautiful. The story behind Cecile and Ruth, Jan's grandmother, is extremely tragic. Putting those two lives together through the letters and having a story thread to go through it was really difficult. So we worked on it for quite some time, and we were so excited when it first came out. And so here is With Kisses from Cecile, and that's the necklace that is the jewelry. So each historical fiction that we work on, we're having a jewelry collection that goes with it. So right now I'm writing a time travel romance, and because I love Paris and I learned so much about Paris writing With Kisses from Cecile, my character Maribel gets jettisoned back into 1900 Paris. And so I've been doing all my digging about 1900 Paris exposition, which is amazing. And it also crosses into silent movies. Alice Guy, who has been refound recently, she's one of my characters in the book. So Jan is designing the Maribel collection of jewelry to go with that. And hopefully we're going to have this done this year. And we publish under Storyology, Design and Publication. And after this one, we have one that's coming together in some of our notes about, it's going to be called Fanfare, and it's about the grand tour that young ladies used to take in Europe. And we have a souvenir fan that each fan blade has got signatures of people. That's what they used to do when they would be on their tours. They would sign their fans for each other. And so we've got a story kind of brewing along those lines. So I always wanted to do something with words. It's thrilling for me to see my books out in print, thrilling to see my stories and highlights. I'm about to be a grandmother for the first time, and it'll be thrilling for me to read all the wonderful children's books to my grandkids. But, you know, words is my passion. I just love reading other people's words and trying to get mine down to sound as good as some of these other words that I do read. That's me.
Well, Anne, listen, that sounds fantastic. Tell everybody where, because I've been on your websites, but tell everybody where your website is located and where they can get your books from. And do you have an
Okay.
idea when Curious Traveler is coming out?
The Carousel Traveler will be out by fall, end of summer is kind of where we're looking. You can go to my website, AnneArmisteadAuthor.com, and it's Armistead, A-R-M with the I, S-T-E-A-D. So it's AnneArmisteadAuthor.com. You can find me on Facebook, Anne Armistead Author. You can find me on Twitter. My books can be purchased on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can find the links off of my website. I would love to offer anyone who visits my website, I have a newsletter, and if you subscribe to my newsletter, I'll put you in a drawing for a free ebook. So please, please, please think about doing that. My newsletter comes out once a month, and it has information about antiquing and writing and recipes and charities. I always support a charity every month through my newsletter. So I would love to add some more subscribers to that. And I also spotlight Atlanta authors. Any authors that I've become friends with, known, networked with, I love to support other authors through my newsletter as well. So that's how you find me.
Is there anybody out there that has some questions for Miss Anne?
Oh, thank you. Yes, it is. Our jewelry, you can go to storyologydesign.com or Storyology Design on Etsy, or go to my website. There's links for it. I'm wearing a couple of the pieces, and there's fleur-de-lis earrings, tassel earrings. So yes, definitely find it on our website.
And have you spoken at a writing conference, maybe Georgia Romance Writers or anything?
Oh, I actually have, yes. I've given a workshop on how to write historical fiction. Marilyn Barron, I don't know if you know Marilyn, but she and I did a workshop together for Georgia Romance. I've done several different workshops around for small writing groups. I do writing, manuscript editing as well after being an English teacher for 25 years. A lot of writers approach writing differently. Some people dream and know the characters right away and think, oh, it's a character driven. I know exactly this story is going to be about X, and they know everything about X, and then they work out a plot. I'm the opposite. I'm very plot driven. I get these ideas for stories, and then I think, who can I place in this story that I can torment? And so then I create my characters. I've always been very story centric. And so one of the things I have to be careful about when I do write and go back and edit is working on every facet of a character's persona. So to do that, I do the thing that you'll hear writers tell you all that they will do. They'll interview their characters. So I have a lot of different workshops I've been to. So I've collected through the years different interview questions, and I will sit down and I will just kind of brainstorm. I've got to know who my character looks like. So I do image boards with different famous and not famous faces that appeal to me, so I can get a good idea. But I've got to really work hard on the characterization once I've got my plot figured out. And sometimes when I get to know my character, it will end up changing plot points in the story. But basically my plots, I go along with the journey of the hero pretty much, is where I have taught so long, this idea of the journey of the hero. And so I keep that in my mind when I plot out my stories. And then I put my characters with the mentors and the subplots and everything in, along with that journey of the hero schematic that I use. I never run out of ideas. I'll never write all the ideas I have, but I've been that way since a kid. And I think it's because I read so much, and I was a TV holic. I loved TV, episodic TV growing up. And I was probably writing fan fiction before I knew fan fiction existed. I would take the end of a story like Bonanza or something that would really upset me because one Sunday little Joe's wife, he would marry and the wife would die, and the next Sunday they never mentioned little Job had a wife. And I was like, how do they do this? So I had the idea of continuing story arcs when I was a kid and writing fan fiction. So I just love reading newspapers. I can make a story out of a commercial if it's one of those tear-jerking commercials. So just keeping your mind and your heart open, and the ideas are just everywhere.
Next up is Renea Winchester. Renea is the one author that I have had the pleasure of meeting. Renea Winchester was born and raised in Bryson City, North Carolina. She began her writing career in Georgia, where she penned several nonfiction works, including Farming, Friends, and Fried Bologna Sandwiches, and under the publishing house of Mercer University Press, which was nominated to the prestigious SEBA Award, earned Renea a nomination for Georgia Author of the Year, and received the endorsement from the Pulpwood Queens. And those that authors in this world know that the Pulpwood Queens is one of those book club opportunities that you die for. It's the largest book club in the country. After winning the Wilma Dykeman Award for Essay and the Appalachian Writers Award, Renea focused on transitioning to fiction, and I'm glad she did. Renea has served on the Atlanta Writers Board, Georgia Writers Association, and judges multiple literary awards, which is how I happened to first meet Renea at the Georgia Writers Red Clay Writers Conference over 5 years ago, when there was a little manuscript that I was working on and hoping someday would get published named Sanctuary. Renea has the distinction of being the first editorial eyes outside of my own editor who saw the Sanctuary's opening chapter. And it was through her advice that I got a lot of great insight and ended up getting a publishing contract the following year. So I'm very indebted to Renea and her wisdom. In April of 2020, Firefly Southern Fiction released Outbound Train. It's set in her hometown of Bryson City. And if y'all are not familiar with Bryson City, it's one of those small mill towns up in the mountains of North Carolina, which you would refer to as the Appalachia region. It's based in 1976. It's a triumphant story of perseverance and hope that despite the harshness of poverty, and of course, had been recently published, by the way, that her novel just got published in France, which is amazing. I still want to know how they parlez-vous the Appalachia accent in the story. That'll be interesting to see how that translates. Renea is passionate about literacy, Appalachian heritage, preserving rare seeds, cultivating endangered plants, and meeting new friends and honoring old ones, such as offering tribute to the late Terry Kay recently as well. She was on a panel that gave tribute to Terry Kay, who recently passed. And if you're from the Georgia writing world at all, you know who Terry Kay was and remains to be. Let's hear what's new with Renea and then learn more about her literary journey. Connie, my mother, and I have read and enjoyed Outbound Train, so I hope you have the follow-up novel in the works, Ms. Renea, and I give you the floor to talk about yourself a little bit more, your writing journey, and obviously what's cooking in your world on the novel front.
Well, thank you so much. Just at the mention of Terry Kay, I still, I can't even talk about it. He was just my world. And we should all be so lucky to have a mentor. So first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who makes this happen, and to Anthony and Angie, Sharon, Scott, and of course, Mike, and hello, my friends. Hey, Barbara, mwah, kisses. So I'm seeing a lot of faces that I recognize, except for the blank screens. I don't know who you are. I'd love to see your faces. I never know what to say about myself. I started writing when I was writing in the diary. You know, it was called your diary. It wasn't a journal. It was the diary, and it had a teeny tiny lock and a key, and you kept the key around your neck and you kept the diary with you everywhere you went, and you hoped no one read it at school like they did mine. It was not good. It's a miracle I'm writing at all. But some of my secret things were also like, of course, who you're in love with when you're in 7th grade, and everyone was in love with the same person. So I guess it was okay. But I've been writing for a long time. I never mention age or dates because I get that from my grandmother. We don't mention how old we are. So my writing process is the complete opposite of Anne's. I write every single word by hand first on a piece of paper. I am a gazillion% place driven with another gazillion character driven, and then the plot pulls itself together because the great one, Terry Kay, said, your job is to watch the character and document what they do. And so that is what I do. If you sat me down and told me I had to write an outline, I would probably kill myself. I've tried, oh Lord, how I have tried. You have no idea how I've tried to conform, and it doesn't work for me. So my message to every writer is do what works for you and keep doing it, and do it when you think it's not working, because it probably is, and you just don't know that it's working. I would also like to say thank you, Mike, for listening to my advice. No one listens to Mama. And then they email me years later and they say, oh, I wish you had been more forceful and I would have listened to you. And so you are like my poster child for success. And I'm so proud of you. But I started with short stories and had excellent success, very lucky. You can get short stories published now. There is actually a revival of short stories, poetry. If you're a poet, there is money out there to win contests galore. So don't think that it's not for you. It definitely is. So from the short stories, when I moved to Georgia, and I won't bore everyone who already knows me with my story, but I met Farmer Billy, who was the last farmer in Roswell, Georgia. And I met him because my daughter, I was taking her to dance class, which is what you're supposed to do when you're in Atlanta. If you want to be a good mother, you take your child to dance class. And she saw this little sign on the road that said baby goats. And she said, we need to stop. And I said, we're late because you're always late in Atlanta because of the traffic. And so she said, well, we just came from Bible school and the lesson was on being obedient. And I think God wants you to be obedient, and let me see those baby goats. So we pulled in and saw the baby goats. And from there, I realized that it was a lesson in seeing people and actually seeing humanity. And I had been passing Farmer Billy every day, twice a day for years. He was struggling. He needed a friend. I was struggling. My mother had ovarian cancer. I needed a friend. And so the baby goats kind of pulled us together. I wrote our experiences on napkins that I had tucked in my pocket in the field in Atlanta. So that story was just basically, I need to get this down before I forget, because I had so many other things going on. So I guess that's why I can't really sit down to a blank screen. So from the Billy incident, I joined the Atlanta Writers Group, which they have incredible critique groups. I'm so happy that you have a critique group formed now. If you're not a member of it, join. The best feedback you can have is from a reader, from someone who is a professional reader, and if we're writers, we should be reading. So the other thing is, it's my name on the book. It's actually my grandpa's name. The Winchester name matters to me. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes, but your critique group will say, point out clearly, this isn't working, or you've named, this is a different character name, or they'll point that out. So I decided I would transition to fiction after this incident with my brother. We were at home, 4th of July. We were riding in a mule-covered wagon, and we really were. And it was just like 5 years ago. It was a little tourist wagon, and I saw this trailer park and this girl looking at me outside the window, and she haunted me. That was my Carol Ann. And so my brother said, you need to write Bryson City the way it was when we grew up, not this tourist town, not this train that everybody hops on and they ride into this glitzy area. You need to show them who we are. So, set in 1976 in a textile town, I didn't know anything about textiles, taught myself to sew because I will be authentic in my writing. I don't write what I know, I write what I need to know. I write what I need to learn about, because I have the personal philosophy, if I'm not learning, I'm dying. And so I taught myself to sew, and using my grandmother's sewing machine that hated me badly. It hated me. I bled a lot. But I write a blog the farm. We'll link to that on Facebook, and I document that experience. And so that took the process of me being authentic, and it's also writing about my hometown, and I didn't want my family and friends to tell me I got it wrong. So that took multiple years. Mercer declined it because they're focusing back on nonfiction. Oh boy, great. So I shopped it around. I'm incredibly fortunate to have been published with Fireflies Southern Fiction. Teresa, I'll talk to you off camera if you want to about Christian publishing. I'll be happy to talk to you about that. But so that's kind of how Outbound Train got here. It's a first person narrative with a mother-daughter. So we start with Mother, who's Barbara Parker, and then Carol Ann has her side, and then we have Granny Pearline, who I cannot control whatsoever. You will love her. She is amazing. I think I've really recognized that I might be her just a smidge, not all the way, but just a smidge. But the critique group, going back to the importance of that, they were the ones that loved Granny Pearline, but said, she's kind of taking over. So I had to rein her in, which gives me the freedom to use her elsewhere. I'm currently working on The Mountains Remember, which is historical fiction based on my grandmother's displacement to form the national park. It is a research machine. I love the research, but again, I want to be as authentic as possible. I also think that being rigid wouldn't have worked for me in this particular novel that I'm working on, because Sadie Bird she's a widow, and I was actually editing. I kind of write and edit for a while and write and edit for a while. And I was editing, and literally, y'all will understand this because you're writers, a dog comes into the scene, the pages, and so I wrote in the margins in red, because I have two colors going. I wrote in red, oh my goodness, Sadie just got a dog. And the dog was what I needed to move that story along, because in the scenes where it's just her, it was lagging, and I knew it. I just didn't know what to do. So the dog came in, and of course, I want all of the readers to own my book. I write for you. I don't write for myself. I did a Facebook contest of Name the Dog with a picture of the dog. And so his name is Lazarus. Perfect name. I would have never come up with Lazarus ever. ever. So that's where I am. I locked myself in the writing closet during the holiday break and wrote almost 40,000 words. So I'm up to almost 70. I have a drop dead deadline, lock yourself in the closet deadline of 2 months from now. It's going to be done because, you know, the mountains are greening up and I've got farmland and I'm not going to have time. So that's my journey about writing. I also am very passionate about outside and heritage seeds and saving the planet and, you know, all those things we can squeeze in when we're not writing.
Renee, that is, you know, your story is awesome. And first of all, when did you find out your book was going to be published in France?
Oh, see, so it hasn't been published in France yet. So I have to tell you how this happened. And this is why reviews are everything, because I just found this out this week. Reviews. Except I rarely use the word review because Amazon's watching. I use opinion. I want your opinion of Outbound Train. Behind the scenes, I'm on this publisher's radar. I don't know how. I am saying it's 10,000% the ghost of Terry Kay. But this French publisher was watching my goofy reviews. And I didn't know. I don't watch them. I don't look at them a whole lot. You know, I just say, please, if you love me, write a review. And so they approached my publisher, and the publisher actually sent them all of the titles that they had released, and Outbound Train was the only one that they wanted. The French reading public wants authenticity. And that's, I have to stay true to my people and my land and my characters. I can't write for the market right now. And that market is changing and it's scary for all of us authors, but I have to be true to the story. And so I got an email on Facebook, a message from Marie, who was the translator. Marie is my mother's middle name. And so I'm like, oh, there's Mom and Terry Kay in heaven, you know, giving me blessings. And so what did I think? I thought it was spam. I didn't think it was real because my publisher didn't tell me anything. So I didn't answer it because I was afraid I'd be hacked. So a week passes. I get another message and I'm like, okay, I'm going to open this. And I open it. And she's like, I'm your translator. And I'm like, oh my word. I emailed Bradley. I'm like, am I being punked? And he's like, no, we sold it. We just weren't going to tell you until we got the money. And I'm like, well, she wants me to collaborate with her. And so it was just insane. And that is the readers. That's 100% the readers. It will be released April of this year. And so I am busy sewing the bookmarks for my French readers. And I'm going to send them some postcards and sign them, but it's crazy. And so you're not going to believe this, Mike. She has only asked me one question in the translation process. So,
wow.
No, I must speak really good La Française.
Renee, where can folks get your book and how's the best way to get in touch with you?
So as I mentioned, my publisher is amazing. He is actually offering a 25% off discount for y'all. All you have to do is to go onto their website. The book is traditionally published. You can get it, you know, Amazon, Goodreads. You can link through Goodreads and get buyer there. Any independent bookstore can get it for you. But if you want the 25% off discount, you go to Shop LPC, that's for Lighthouse Publishing of the Carolinas, shoplpc.com. And then at the window, you just type in when you're checking out, B as in boy, N as in Nancy, W as in women, 25 train, and you'll get 25% off. And that's an amazing publisher that offers that deal for you guys.
Anybody have a question for Renee?
I wish I knew how much marketing you had to do at your own expense. Remember, authenticity also equals honesty. So especially right now, book deals are great, but you're going to be marketing on your own dime. And I'm glad you showed me the notebook that you have. I don't know if I've got it in my bag or not, but Outbound Train and The Mountains Remember, one of the things that I teach in my classes, I haven't taught this for a very long time. I don't know if Mike was included when I taught one of these classes, but I draw out where the story is taking place. And I carry it with me. I don't necessarily reference it, but I carry it with me. So in Outbound Train, it was like I had the little train tracks, and then I had the trailer park, because that was based on a real trailer park that just recently burned down. And I just drew out the whole town, which was so great because it didn't take much, because most of the things in my book you can go lay your hands on. They're still there in the town. So I did that again with The Mountains Remember. I drew Sadie's land and what it looked like. And I also have a picture of a real person, two ladies who are my Sadie, that just, because sometimes I have to sit down and talk to her. I'm really not, I do. I have to just sit down and say, am I being true to you? Am I telling your story the way that you want me to tell it? And that happened with my Carol Ann. I carried a photo of Carol Ann with me for years, and I just had to be true to her. I've done workshops before. I've done actually marketing workshops in independent bookstores, and I've done all kinds of things. So I love first person so much. I have to tell you that I challenged myself with The Mountains Remember to go into third person, and it is so hard for me, but I am staying with it. The Mountains Remember is a two-part, and the first part is third person Sadie, and then we have another character who's much younger, who's telling the same story in her words, in her 12-year-old voice. So that allows me to parallel the two different sides of this very traumatic issue, being displaced. With Carol Ann, I have to tell you, there were multiple versions, and there were versions that were third person, and I couldn't, she just fought me. She just fought me. She would not talk to me. And that was when I emailed Terry, and I'm like, my characters aren't talking to me. I was distraught. And he's like, you need to just put it aside, and you need to step away and then watch. And I felt very comfortable with the first person after I stopped chasing them, trying to make them do what I wanted them to do.
I'd like to, at this point, introduce Miss Debby Giusti. She's a medical technologist by day who loves working with test tubes and petri dishes among as much as she loves to write. I hope you don't mix those up. Growing up as an Army brat, Debby met and married her husband, then a captain in the Army at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Together, they've traveled the world, raised 3 wonderful Army brats of their own, and have now settled in Atlanta, Georgia, where Debby spins tales of suspense that touch the heart and soul. Debby's stories have won numerous awards, almost too many to even begin to mention, including 2 Daphne Maurier Awards for Inspirational Suspense, the National Reader's Choice Award, the Inspirational Reader's Choice Award, Golden Quill, the Beacon, and Gail Wilson Award of Excellence and the Right Touch, just to name some. In addition to full-length fiction, Debby has written magazine articles for Southern Lady, Woman's World, Our Sunday Visitor, Army and Family, and served for over 12 years on the editorial advisory board of Advance for administrators of the laboratory. Her inspirational romance novels are far too numerous to begin to name them all, going back to her first novel, which came out in 2007, entitled Nowhere to Hide. Since then, she has published more than 24 novels, winning awards along her writing journey. Her most recent inspirational romance novel, Amish Christmas Search, came out October 1st of last year, published by Love Inspired Suspense. I am honored and privileged to be able to introduce y'all to Miss Debby Giusti and look forward to hearing more about her, all of her writing journey, if we can condense it within one night, and obviously a little bit about her most recent novels. So Miss Debby, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks so much for having me here. And thank you, Sharon, for inviting me. And I loved hearing Anne and Renee's stories. Gosh, and there's so much that will be similar, and I'll probably be mentioning too, because writing is writing. And it's so fun to get together, isn't it, in the evening and to talk about books and writing. I don't think there's anything that I enjoy more. So thanks, Mike, again. Just fantastic. As Mike said, I write for Love Inspired Suspense, and that Love Inspired is a Christian publisher under the Harlequin umbrella. And Harlequin has been bought out by HarperCollins. So actually I'm writing for HarperCollins now. The books for Love Inspired come out, they do 6 sweet romances a month and 6 suspense novels a month. And the books stay on the shelf about a month. You can get them, Hallmark or Walmart always has them, Books A Million, Barnes and Noble. You can also go into any bookstore and order them. They're on Amazon, and also all my backlist are all available on ebooks. So, you know, Amazon is great, and all the other online booksellers as well have the stories. I write inspirational romantic suspense, which is a long title. Basically, I have 3 story arcs within each of my stories. The first one is the character. That's the hero or heroine, the protagonist of the story. And that protagonist starts out in his or her ordinary world, and then something's going to happen and move that character out of that ordinary world into this adventure or the ordeal or whatever it is that's going to happen to the character within the story. And then at the end of the story, that character will have changed. So I used to, before COVID, I taught a writing class in Peachtree City. And I always said that your character at the end of the story is not the same as he or she was at the beginning. If you took that character back to the ordinary world, they wouldn't be the same because of what happened in the story. Often I'll add a wound from the past. You know, so many of us carry baggage, or hopefully if we're a little older, we've worked through that problem in the past or that wound that we might have had. But some people, especially my characters, they're still struggling with whatever happened that hurt them. Perhaps they're unable to forgive somebody. Perhaps they're unable to forgive themselves. Sometimes they don't even realize that they have that wound, or that wound is still festering until it comes out in the story. And then by the end of the story, they have to face that wound, because I think we can't live our authentic self if we are still dealing with something from the past. So during that story, then, because of all of that that's happening to the character, that's the character arc, and the character will change and grow. I also have the romantic arc because it is a love story. So I have the hero and heroine that get together. And at the beginning, you know, there's banter and they might not like each other and kind of antagonistic towards each other. But of course, by the end, things are going to work out and there will be a happily ever after, because there always is a romance. You can always have, too, you always have a black moment when you think everything's going well and then, oh my goodness, it all falls apart. And so hopefully the reader thinks, how are these two ever going to get together? And yet they're just perfect for each other. And then because my story is told in a Christian worldview, then I have a small faith arc that's gentle and just a thread that runs through it. Sometimes I'll have a character who struggles with God because of that wound. Often they think that God turned his back on them, when in reality, by the end of the story, they realize, no, they were the ones who turned their back on God. So those are the 3 arcs that I'll have in the stories that I write. As Mike said, my debut novel came out in 2007, We call it getting the call, when the editor phones and says that they want to buy your book, you know, and usually everybody screams and then can't remember anything. Luckily, my editor said, Debbie, I want you to get a tablet of paper and a pen and write down everything I say, because she knew I wouldn't remember it, which I didn't. So I wrote it down. Another thing is, you never say yes to the editor when they call. You wait, you hang up, you say, thank you, let me consider it. You hang up, you scream, you tell your family, your friends, your loved ones. And then when you have calmed down a little bit, then you can decide if everything sounds good on the what she's talked about, how she's going to buy it and whatnot. And then you call back and say, yes, of course, yes, I'd love for you to publish my book. So in 2007, then my first story was published. And now in March is this is the 27th book that does that come out on the screen there. Hidden Amish Secrets, 27th book from Love Inspired Suspense. And then I have 3 independent stories that I've published as well. This story is set in the North Georgia mountains. I love that environment because I had 2 children who graduated from North Georgia College and State University in Dahlonega, and that area is so beautiful. So you've got the mountains. It's great for suspense because there are treacherous roads there. I embellish the story with Mother Nature, with snowstorms or ice storms or terrible rain, and they're just that isolated, dark, suspenseful area just seems to be a good environment for the story. So this is a story about Julianne Graber. I'm currently writing Amish suspense. So she was in an Amish community, and her father and brother were killed, and she believes they were murdered, but the sheriff claimed that it was a murder-suicide is what he determined. So she left the Amish community, and now she's come back. The story opens when she's coming back 5 years later because she has to sell her father's farm and farmhouse. And the neighbor across the street, William Levy, it was an old friend. And of course, there's going to be a little romance that goes on with them. And somebody doesn't want Julianne back in town, and there are secrets that need to be kept, and he's afraid the secrets will be revealed with her coming back. So William has to protect her, and together they're out to find out about that antagonist. You know, it's been mentioned, I think Renee mentioned, write what you know. That's kind of an adage that a lot of people go by, to write what you know. When I started out writing, I did a medical series because I was a medical technologist. I'm currently not working in that line, but I was at the time. So I wrote Magnolia Medical, about a large medical laboratory that was in Atlanta, and then the scientists would go out to other areas in Georgia and solve crimes that had to do with medical situations. So I really enjoyed that. That was a fun beginning, and it was a nice way to use especially those emerging infectious disease articles that I'd written for advance for administrators of the laboratory, and was able to piggyback on those and then add them in my stories. And because of my military background, my dad was military, my husband and my son. So then I wrote military investigation series and wrote 9 books on that. I created a fictional military base in South Georgia, similar to Fort Benning. My son was stationed at Fort Benning then. My husband and I had met and married at Fort Knox, Kentucky. So Fort Rickman, my created fictional military post, was kind of a mix of both of those, which was fun to do. I enjoyed all that. In fact, I sent, for one of the covers of my book, I sent the art department a picture of the quarters that I lived in with my parents, and said, can the house in the story be about like this? And sure enough, they did it almost exactly, looking exactly like the house that I lived in, which is fun. So again, I had 9 books on that. And towards the end, I was thinking, I needed to have something new come in, and Amish fiction was really coming to the forefront. And my editor was interested in getting some stories that had an Amish element in it. So I added an Amish community close to Fort Rickman, and then had stories that involved military and Amish. And that was interesting because the Amish, of course, are such peace-loving people. And then I'd have this heinous villain and the contrast between the two. And I did enjoy that. And then my editor said, how about just straight Amish suspense? Will you do it? So I was one of the first authors for Love Inspired Suspense to do that. And they were so excited because they'd have a character with a bonnet on the cover. That's what they talk about, having the bonnet on the cover with their little cap. And so I started the Amish, and I do enjoy it. I must say it's, I lived in Pennsylvania, I lived in Ohio, near Amish communities in both places. I've always enjoyed seeing them and getting to know more about their way of life. And there's so many resources now that are available writing Amish that it's been just a fun experience. And when I start a new book, it seems like I'm right in that Amish farmhouse. You know, I've got my cap on and my long dress, and it seems like home to me. I'm sure I'll move on to another type of story, another maybe back to military, because I do enjoy that so much. But right now I am enjoying the Amish. People always ask where you get your ideas, and both Anne and Renee touched on that everywhere. You know, a writer, I think we could go, walk down the street and we'd have 5 ideas of stories. The thing that I find though, is I have to make sure that idea that I have can be developed into a full-length manuscript, because I might have a lot of ideas, but they won't necessarily play out to be a complete story the way they need to be. So a lot of them get shelved. And then when I get an idea that just seems like it's going to work, then I spend a lot of time trying to put all the pieces together. Again, Renee and Anne mentioned this about how you write your process. So we talk about there are pantsers, seat of the pants writers. They sit at their computer and they start typing. And it's kind of stream of conscious. The story just flows, beginning to end. I think a lot of character-driven stories are sometimes like that. Maybe literary fiction. I can see those authors sitting down and writing the stories in that way. Suspense, what I write, I think most of us are plotters, so that we have to have some type of an outline or a structure that we build that features the different elements of the story before we actually start writing. And for me, that's the synopsis. So I spend quite a few weeks trying to come up with this story, the characters, the goals, motivation, and conflict for each, the hero and heroine and the villain, and then the different situations that I'm going to put these characters in. And then I'll write the synopsis. And synopses are not fun to write, especially at the beginning when you're just starting out writing. For me, it was very difficult. But now I find it's a wonderful tool, because within 15 to 18 pages, I can determine if I have everything, if all the pieces are there, if I can fit it together. And with my synopsis, then I have a wonderful overview, and I can say, oh no, this doesn't work, or this is the wrong villain. Sometimes I've changed the villain because of the synopsis, when I've said, oh no, it's not X, it has to be Y, and so that's a wonderful tool for me. Then I do the first 3 chapters, because that's what the editors want. They call it a proposal. That's the synopsis in the first 3 chapters. And the first 3 chapters are difficult to write. They take time because there's so much information that the author is giving to the reader in those chapters. They're introducing the reader to the characters, to the hero and heroine. They're giving little teasers about some problem that might develop in the future. They're also laying the groundwork for maybe some of that backstory, that wound, perhaps, whatever it is. Everything that is going to develop through the rest of the book can usually be found, at least in some way, in those first 3 chapters. So again, I spend a lot of time on the 3 chapters and the synopsis, and then I send it to my editor, and she decides whether she wants to buy the book or not. I'm on contract right now. I have a 4-book contract, so that's usually what they do after you're established with the publisher. Then they'll have a contract where you have for so many books, but she has to determine whether this is the story she wants, or if she wants to tweak it a little bit, or maybe she just had a story. Sometimes an author might be writing about a fireman, but they've had 12 fireman books that have come in, and they don't need another fireman book. So the editor might say, oh, can you change it? Can he be a cop, or something else? So she looks it over and then she sends it back to me with the okay. And then I continue writing. I do a rough draft and I use an Alpha Smart, which is a small portable word processor. As you can see, it has a very small screen, so I can't edit. And all I can do is type. And it keeps me moving forward. So I type my manuscript with an Alpha Smart, and that gives me a fast first draft. It has 8 files, and each file holds 25 pages, 8.5 by 11 pages. So I know that I need 12 files in order to get my 300 to 320 pages of book, the completed manuscript, and that's about 55,000 words is what I'm doing for my stories. So I get a fast first draft, and then I go back and revise and revise and revise and revise and get it into the shape, cut and paste, edit, all of that. And then when it's finally finished, then I send it off to the editor in the final form. Then we get to do an art fact sheet when for the art department. I give them 3 ideas of possible covers, and usually they pick one of the ideas that I have. I really love the art department at Love Inspired. They're very easy to work with and listen to the author, which is great. And we can send in pictures as well. So for the Amish, I'll send in a picture of the Amish clothing, the buggies, whatever it is, often a scene, maybe the farm on the hillside, whatever it is that I think would be a good pictorial on the cover. And then we get our story back when the editor has finished editing it. She'll go through, and a copy editor will look at that. We'll get that back, and then we do again more revisions, more taking what their suggestions are. The editor never changes our words. We're the ones, so they'll put on we do computerized editing, so it's I get back when they'll have it on the side, and it'll say, can we add a little bit more here? Or one time I had a story that was in South Georgia on the coast, and she said, can you give us more about the landscape around that? So I added trees and the flowers and what they would see, that type of thing. So then I'm finishing up that, and I send it back in, and then they have about 4 more editors that will go through that story and read it again and again and again. And sometimes then I'll get a query later on. My editor will say, oh, the final editor said, I don't know, blue eyes in one place, green eyes in another, and which is the correct color of the eyes. It's amazing that you can have so many people look at a story, and I can go over a story so many times, but these little errors can still be there. So hopefully by the end, it's pretty clean, and the errors are very minor if you do find some. So that's basically the process for Love Inspired. I did want to say that for all of you that are considering writing, I think the best thing is just to sit down and write. Think of a story, whether you're a pantser or a plotter, and sometimes we're all pantsers at the beginning. My first book I typed it out on an electric typewriter when the kids were in school. I had a little desk, and I sat there, and I loved it. I think writing your first book is the most exciting thing, because you don't know all the problems that can befall you, or you don't have the rules necessarily. You just write for the pure joy of it. So it's wonderful. Well, in those days, I didn't have a computer. So after I typed it once, then I had to revise it, and I had to go back and type it again. And of course, I went to my first writing conference, and I thought for sure I'd make a sale right away. Well, I didn't. Of course, it was rejected, and a lot of rejections happened between that time and when I finally sold. So there was a lot to learn. At least I had a lot to learn. And I'm open to questions. I'd love to hear about, let me just say that I am on Facebook. I'd love to, I'm always available for messaging on Facebook. It's Debby Giusti 9. I don't know where the 9 came from, but when I put my name in for the address, they gave me a 9. So I'd love to see all of you on Facebook. That'd be great.
Who has a question for Miss Debby?
Debby, what is your writing process? We talked about everything that's keeping us from writing. How do you write? I mean, to me, 4 books, I can't even get one done. How do you structure your writing process?
Well, as I said, I do it takes me about a month to get the idea and the synopsis done. Then I take a few more weeks for the first 3 chapters and then submit that to my editor. And then it's that AlphaSmart really helps me do that fast draft, which has been invaluable. I sometimes wish some people write it like 1,000 words a day. I wish I could do it like that, because they know exactly where they are in the process, but it seems like I have to, this is the way I write. As somebody mentioned, every person has their own process. You have to find it. And then once you find it, it's really hard to change. And I think there is, everyone has their own way to write. So that's what I do. I usually write 2 books a year, but some people write much more than that. So, but that gives me time for Christmas, for family, for summer vacations and things like that. So it works well for me. Teresa, and for everyone, I'm on a blog. We've been on it for years now, and we've been Writer's Digest 101 Best Blogs for Writers called Seekerville, Seeker.
Oh, I saw that today.
Yeah, the journey continues. So, and we have everything that we've ever written has been archived. So you can go to that site and put in the taskbar, whatever the topic is that you want, and these different blog posts will come up. So, and come and chat with us because we're there every day. And we're talking about writing every day. Sometimes we give away books, but we always have fun, and we have virtual coffee and sometimes sweet rolls and things like that. So do come. All right.
Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I thank the Noonan Carnegie Library for their role in making this all happen too. Again, next month, 1 month from today, March 18th, we'll be doing another edition of Hometown Novel Nights, which will be Front Porch Musings, talking with newspaper writers and columnists and how to write smaller, shorter things, which makes it even more challenging.